What's going on, y'all? KMBest here. Let's take a look at the best decks to climb in Marvel Snap. In recent weeks, there's been a triumvirate at the top of the metagame with Techno-Organic Virus, Captain Carter Combo, and Victoria Hand trading off spaces. Techno-Organic Virus won my recent tournament, the KMBest Block Party. This was the list. It is, in my opinion, a very astute observation of the metagame to notice that people are playing a little bit less Surfer and a little bit more weird other combo stuff, and then attempt to adjust to that metagame by saying what we're actually going to do in the Techno-Organic Virus shell, rather than maximizing for points, is maximize for tech. This is a deck that has a lot of cards that are good in specific matchups. So if your opponent is playing a bunch of Gambit Horsemen of Death, you not only have Mobius, you also have armor to protect your stuff. If they're on Killmonger, guess what? Armor's pretty good there too. If they're playing a deck that's gaining a lot of green power, you have Shadow King. And of course, if they're playing a deck that's going to cheat a bunch of power onto the board, things like a very large Brood, or even things like Phoenix Force or Hela, you have Stardust as an answer for that. What this metagame has demonstrated is that it's very easy to get to a very large amount of power with Techno-Organic Virus. So the question then becomes, do we actually need to be investing in the power part of this deck, or can we instead play all of these silver bullets that the power of TOV allows us to just happen to include? And then when they're not good in whatever matchup, well, it's okay. We'll TOV their text away anyway. I am still a pretty firm believer in the inclusion of Wasp in the Captain Carter combo deck, in as much as I have been playing it recently. This exact 12 also got top 4 in my tournament from someone who watched my videos and was like, oh yeah, that does seem like a good idea. And I think that it does a couple of decent things in these tempo-y matchups, but fundamentally, this is probably still the most underplayed deck in the entire metagame. It is a very difficult deck to play, in my humble opinion, and I do think that makes it one of the harder to adopt combo decks. I think there are a lot of other combo decks that you could play that are a little more straightforward. Decks like Zombie Galacti, decks like Hela, things of that nature. Even Phoenix Force weirdly gets to appreciate itself as being a little more straightforward, whereas this deck is more like Sholau, where you're almost code switching throughout the games depending on what you expect to be playing against. You're swapping your game plans, you're figuring out what exactly you're trying to do, and you're changing from a combo deck to a mid-range deck based on your draws, based on your opponent's game plan, based on all of those things. Now, I do think that this is still a very potent list, but I think basically anything you do in this space is going to be a very potent list. It's very difficult for you to play something that is related to the Captain Carter Prodigy Maverick industrial, weapons complex that it's created and have it not be at least kind of a good deck. Definitely something to keep an eye on, because I already think this deck is amazing, and I think it's going to gain stick going into the upcoming week. Stick, of course, being the 4/3 on reveal Maverick type card. That is what this deck is about. Don't let the Surfer fool you. After playing a little bit of this deck, it has become pretty clear, to me at least, that Gambit was probably nerfed by a little bit, maybe not by a massive amount, and that any game you end up with like more than 2 Gambits, you are probably someone who has made a mistake along the way. He is a lot better in the role that I typically play him as, which is just, this is a nice card to have, but it's become even more clear that the things you actually want to copy in this deck are Victoria Hand and Sasquatch, and you can go a different direction with it, right? Like, you could play the Lee Hand version. In fact, after we finish talking about these 3 decks, we're going to talk about the alternate builds for these 3 decks, because that is where a lot of things are happening right now. But this is just generally the space V-Hand wants to be in. V-Hand is a copy target. You have another copy target that helps you go extra tall. And then Gambit is pretty clearly a 3rd place option who is fine, but definitely doesn't scale with the copying the way the other stuff can. As far as Lee Hand goes, this is Sizer's list. It's a very solid mid-rangey list. He actually, to my tournament, brought a version that cut Mobius for Rogue. I think that's just dead wrong. Like, I get what he's going for there. He's trying to rogue their Mobius, but I think it's just too much of a mistake to not bring your own Mobius in this situation. So I have this version here to present to y'all instead, which is still one of his builds, just maybe gone a little bit back in time. This is using Lee Hand, of course, the Lin Lee, as your way of going taller instead of Sasquatch. The basic idea here is you'll be a little bit better into Mobius specifically, because Sasquatch gets really turned off by Mobius, and so you don't really have the ability to access that game plan if you are using Mobius, but you can still access that game plan if you are using Lin Lee. Effectively, this is the version of the deck that you're going to want to play if you're seeing a ton of Mobius. For Captain Carter combo, if you don't want to worry about any of my Wasp Killmonger type stuff, it's totally fine. You can do this stuff instead. People are definitely going to ask me, should I buy Wolverine to play this deck? I promise you right now, the second Stick comes out, I am going to be cutting Wolverine for Stick in this exact list, and that is a card that comes free in a game mode if you want it. I find it hard to believe that Wolverine will be a good purchase just from now until Thursday. It does not seem like an effective use of your tokens to me. And a couple other builds of Techno-Organic Virus. I do think this build is either the second or best build, depending on how you actually want to look at it. What I like about this build is the Mother Ascani. What I don't like about this build is being a Mother Ascani deck makes you a little bit more vulnerable to opposing Mobius, and you don't really want to give them a lot of reason to do that. And people like myself are playing a decent amount of Killmonger, and the Andre Var deck does have the armor over it, and that makes some sense to me as well. But the real sticking point between the two archetypes for me is these are functionally similar, and then you get to swapping Stardust for Mother Ascani. And I wouldn't be surprised if what ended up happening was something more like a synthesis, where you end up on the Andre Var build, but you just play Mother Ascani instead of Stardust, right? Like, that seems like where this is sort of headed if I were able to predict the future. There is also the myriad versions of Shadowlands Daredevil-based Techno-Organic Virus decks. There's a line from a popular song in, like, underground rap circles, I suppose, in 2012, I want to say, called The Last Huzzah, where the rapper on the track goes, "Worst rapper on the track, third coolest." That's kind of how I feel about every Shadowlands Daredevil deck, where it's like, I am pretty sure that you have made the archetype as a whole a little bit worse, but it's not noticeably worse enough, and it does have some reasonable upside. So, like, when I talk about a little bit worse, it's like you took a 60% win rate deck and you brought it down to 58, but you're still winning. Like, it's not gonna make you terrible or anything like that. Just, I think you're giving up a few small percentage points here and there thanks to the shuffle in and thanks to the general increase in the amount of Killmongers people are playing. There's a lot less upside in being a Shadowlands Daredevil type deck compared to the other versions of TOV that we talked about. Like, this is a list that gets hammered by Killmonger, and if it doesn't get hammered by Killmonger, it gets hammered by Mobius, because all the big guys are cards you want to play with Mobius. What I will say is the one card in here who I think really, really holds his weight, Starbrand. That guy's just good. If you are sick of the previous decks that we talked about, and you are angry at all of them, and you would like to beat them up, the Phantom X list is a perfect shell to do that in. This is a perfectly, very solid anti-meta tech list. It's really less of a Phantom X list, more of a list built around those three tech cards, Killmonger, Mobius, and Shadow King. Those are the stars here. Phantom X is here to support that, and it's gonna, by the nature of being a Phantom X deck, be a little bit better into Captain Carter type stuff. It's gonna be very dependent on the draws that it's gonna specifically get for the other matchups, but this just has a massive amount of coverage, and frankly, I think the Phantom X package is just underrated. You often see a lot of people going for, like, extra stuff on the Phantom X package, like Jocasta stuff. But just the Phantom X package alone has a lot of really efficient point output in it. Between Wild Child at 2-9, Demons at 1-6, things like Phantom X himself, which is just a really, really big point swing across every single lane. Like, you're looking at a guy that's effectively 19 power for 4 energy if you can make it happen, and a lot of the other things that are what this deck is doing are also very efficient. To mix that with the tech stuff is just a winning proposition. The real issue for this deck, in as much as there is one, is that that's exactly what the Andre Var Techno-Organic Virus deck is trying to do, and it's a question of which of these is able to better support the tech packages that they're choosing to play, because there's a lot of overlap here. In fact, the real difference is just that the TOV decks don't get to play Killmonger, but otherwise, very similar ethos here. One of the really interesting dynamics in the metagame recently has been people at the top of Infinite recognizing that there aren't enough people on the Surfer deck, and so that effectively leaves combo as an open lane to explore in a world where people are doing all sorts of generally mid-rangey Techno-Virus, Phantom X, just things like that, where you're just like seeing a lot of things that are playing very, very good for their rate, but still just points and tech kind of decks. And this list from Kuhn is a current rank 1 list, and it is a very solid attempt at just saying, like, look, points and tech are cool. I'm multiplying my stuff by my other stuff. And if you're not going to be doing that, and I can dodge your tech by means of Juggernaut and Cosmo, I am going to beat you. I am just going to have more things going on. Now, there are still some things you don't want to see, right? Like Phantom X, not great. Marrow, not great. Those are things that can really impact your ability to like double up on things. But I think the general ethos of this deck, the general theory of why it exists, is one that makes sense right now, where it's like, hey man, a lot of people playing tech decks, not a lot of decks that can Cosmo efficiently. What if we played a deck that was Cosmo juggernauting people, making big guys, playing Iska, just generally having a bunch of haymakers that win the hell out of the lanes they're in? An even more haymakery type build, the Phoenix Force list from Jet. This one got second place in the tournament before running into Stardust and Armor in the same deck in an ignominious fashion. It was quite the riveting matchup in the finals there. I really do think that, again, what this is demonstrating is basically, since Star-Lord, really, there just hasn't been a dominant combo deck. And in metagames that get mid-rangey and tech pile-y, and in some ways these tech pile decks can be good against combo decks, but we're to the point where we're playing Killmonger now, which is very much not a tech card against combo decks. That's a tech card against other points decks, right? And so once we hit that point, it's like, all right, maybe the tech decks have their eye off the ball, and we can just combo out in peace, and they're just not going to be able to do anything about it. And this was true in this tournament right up until he ran into the first deck. The player playing this was Shang Enjoyer, and it was just one of those things where it's like, you know, it's all true until it isn't, but on the whole, I think it's a pretty solid metagame read that will probably hold up on ladder, as long as you don't run into people who are going like super duper de-duper tall. The Surfer decks are a little bit awkward because they can actually combo as high as you, and you kind of have to make some guesses here. But this is a deck that Jet has been playing in Top Infinite for an extended period of time. It has a proven track record, and if you're looking for a combo deck that people are not going to be expecting the output level from, this is definitely one of them. Zombie Galacti operates on very, very similar lines. If you look at the metagame and you say, all of the tech cards that people are playing are these 3 drops that don't matter to me in any meaningful way, then Zombie Galacti, being a deck that gets to play Magic, becomes like a very serious advantage, because very few decks are going to actually pack answers to Magic in this metagame, and it is just really good at using that extra turn. And I think this applies to like a bunch of different things, but largely what I'm getting at is we've hit a point in this metagame where a lot of the mid-range stuff, the broad strokes, is figured out, right? We know what the Surfer deck probably looks like, give or take 2 cards. We know what the TOV deck looks like, give or take 2 cards. We know what the V-Hand deck looks like, give or take 2 cards. There are whole archetypes still fighting to be discovered in the combo section of the metagame. And so, like, for example, Unhelpful Yoda pinged me. He was like, I got to rank 7 with a Nimrod deck. And it's just like basically a lot of stuff that doesn't have to get obliterated by Mobius, by Shadow King, by Killmonger. Anything that's dodging that stuff is usually going to be in a pretty reasonable spot. Now, it does sort of depend on whether Andre Var's deck picks up, because obviously if you're playing a Phoenix Force deck, if you're playing a Nimrod deck, you do not want to see the Armor Stardust deck. It's really, really bad. But this kind of thing, nobody's playing the tech for. 0 people except literally Sizer, who is packing a Scarlet Witch in his V-Hand list, and anyone who happens to god roll the exact Nico to change location on the Limbo. Everything else, this deck is just able to flowchart its way to wins unless it's getting outpointed by a Surfer deck. This is a list that a lot of my fellow High Infinite players have been playing a bunch of recently, and the basic premise is you don't know exactly how you're going to get there, but your goal over the course of the game is to just do something appreciably stupid, whether that be play Wong into Bolts of Balthak, or play Wong into Mother Ascani, or play a Sage that got Mother Ascani'd a couple times, or Wong a Ramatut, or copy a Gambit 3 times off of Images of Icon. It's just do something, right? Like that's kind of it. There's going to be some combination of cards that cost some amount of energy that you're just going to cheat a bunch on, and something good is going to happen, and it's just going to be fine. And that's kind of what this deck is. There's no specific game plan that you imagine to be like the thing you're trying to do every game, which is very different from something like a Surfer deck or really a lot of these other decks. This is a deck where the game plan is open-ended, and you sort of just pick your way through by asking yourself, what is the stupidest possible thing I can do? What is the most outrageous thing I can do in any given situation? And then you just do that, and that's pretty much how the deck plays. I enjoy the super giant style MODOK list a fair bit, but if enough people start playing Stardust, I'm going to start liking it a lot less. What I really like about this list is that you can just do stuff like copy 2 Marrows in your hand, copy 2 Proximas in your hand, play a MODOK. You have like a pretty big guy in the form of a Morbius. Maybe you played a Dakin, who knows? But you just kind of get like 30 free power off of playing a MODOK on the final turn of the game. And it's 30 free power in a couple of weird ways, too, which is particularly helpful. Supergiant isn't the greatest card in this metagame, but it does slow down some of these combo decks in meaningful ways, and that also allows you to use that 30 free power better. Like, if they're, if they have an actual turn 5 as the Surfer deck, they can just combo off to a point where the Marrows won't matter, but if they don't have an actual turn 5, they find that a lot more difficult. And so you just get like a largely more constrained metagame when you play a deck like this, and you're just like, oh, here's all my points. Downside, this is a very Hela-ish list, and Hela really wants, and this deck has very similar dynamics, it really wants to succeed in metagames that are pretty small, and I worry that this metagame might be a little too tall for this style of gameplay to consistently work. Speaking of Hela, this is Fudge's list of Hela, although he prefers to call it Agatha deck with Hela in it. That is not what it is. It's a Hela deck. And this is a list that is basically, I think it's a pretty good meta read. Like, it's not bad to just be like, all right, a lot of people are playing, Techno-Organic Virus decks. A lot of people playing Phantom X decks with all these tech cards and Killmonger. We talked about how combo was a bit of an open space, and Hela is particularly good at being a combo deck that beats up mid-range decks because they mostly don't have good interaction for it. Stardust is that good interaction, so it's just bad luck, I think, that Fudge ran into the Stardust deck 3 consecutive times in my tournament. He beat 2 of them, but lost the 3rd time. And generally speaking, if that isn't happening, you're kind of going to be cruising. Not necessarily to say that this specific list is the exact list you should be playing, although I think Fudge demonstrated pretty well that it was a very reasonable approach. One of the things that really stuck out to me, though, is just I think Hela right now is actually pretty good. I think Nimrod right now is actually pretty good. I think just kind of anything that's ignoring those big 3 tech cards and going reasonably large on points is just a really reasonable consideration. And the big fear for decks like this is that people will pick up that Andre Var list I started the video with, and it's going to be really bad when people are actually playing Stardust. But until you start seeing a lot of it, this kind of thing does seem like it makes sense to me. So normally we end these videos with Destroy. I hope it's not cheating too much to end this video with Nimrod. Unhelpful Yoda played this one into the top 10, so honestly, it's probably a little too good to be the last spot on this video, but it just sort of goes to show what I've been talking about throughout the entire video, which is like, hey, there's a lot of open space in this metagame, and you need to look at the tech cards people are playing and play things that are pretty good into them. Outside of that first list we talked about, nobody's playing Stardust, just isn't a thing that's happening. A lot of people playing Mobius, a lot of people playing Killmonger, not a lot of people doing things that actually make me sad to play a deck like this. This is a deck that has multiple ways of cheating energy, multiple ways of cheating power, and is really able to output levels of power that are going to be too much for your average version of TOV to actually deal with, for your average version of V-Hand to actually deal with. Just start cheating. Play things that cheat. That's what the lesson is. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.